Welcome to Hire Power, the show where we cut through the noise and get real about hiring. I'm Kim Frost, founder of Frost Connections, and after 25 plus years in the search industry, I've seen what works and what absolutely doesn't. If you're a founder, CEO, VP, or HR leader who's tired of bad hires and ready to build a team that actually fits your culture and vision, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Hire Power, where we talk truthfully about hiring, leadership, and building teams that thrive. In this episode, we're going to talk about insight and why smart companies commit to behavioral tools. A few weeks ago, we scratched on the surface of behavioral tools, how they've been used beyond just the executive suite, and why smart companies are integrating them into every stage of the employee life cycle. But today, we're going deeper. I'm joined by one of our, I will say, favorite clients, Rachel, who runs communications and employee development for a client. She's here to talk about what it really looks like to implement a behavioral assessment tool, not just for hiring, but as a long-term strategy for team development, succession planning, and culture building. So, Rachel, thank you for joining me today. So let's start at the beginning. What challenge or pain point led you and the company to consider a behavioral tool in the first place?
There's multiple reasons or multiple pain points, I guess. First is not hiring who we wanted for the job. Or we thought we knew who we were getting from the interview and didn't. I would say, secondly, at the higher level in the organization, I felt like we knew that we really had to scale the growth that we were going through and that we were continuing to project, that we needed to build more trust with each other within leadership to be fully aligned to continue to scale that growth. And then filling gaps. So two of the things we noticed is in some of the hires where we needed it, we were lacking critical thinking and curiosity, just as an example. As you mentioned in one of your prior podcasts, you asked, do we actually need someone strategic or not for specific roles? And that's true. You don't always need a strategic person in every role. We don't need a visionary as a process machine operator, as an example. So it's kind of trying to figure out the traits and skills that we feel are needed in each department within the organization.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a heavy lift, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. But my next question is, how did you evaluate the right tool for your company? Because there's so many of those tools out there. Where did you start and how?
This actually began 5 years ago. We were using very loosely a tool called Predictive Index.
Mm-hmm.
So it measures both cognitive and behavioral traits. And we were really only using that, and not publicly, it was really at the high level. We were just kind of fishing around trying to use the tool with not a ton of training or knowledge. But we had gotten that from a president of our sister division called Hayes Fluid Controls. So the president there was using it. So then we kind of piggybacked off that and tried to use it, as I talked about earlier, trying to kind of draw out that critical thinking and curiosity from the cognitive level. So we started there. We realized that's not really going to work. It's too difficult to use. Not everyone is trained in it. So then I began working with actually a high-level executive coach that one of our VBs had utilized her services. Phenomenal person. But it was really, really heavy into the psychology portion of it. And so it worked. It was phenomenal for the high-level C-level executive VP's key positions, but we could not use it throughout the organization. And it required a pretty heavy lift from her as well in terms of cost and timing. And we could not be trained on it because of her expertise and specialty. We could never just take that and do it ourselves.
Right.
So I was like, okay. And I really, really felt like we were missing out on the production floor. We are a manufacturing company and our greatest amount of employees are on the production floor. Okay. So that completely eliminated them from both of those options. So as phenomenal as she wanted, it just wasn't as expansive as I felt that we could get. If we did that, then I was prepared to go Myers-Briggs for the rest of the company. So that would be managers, supervisors, employees, and then keep the other folks with this other coach. So time went on. And then my favorite person, Andy, he used to be the president at Hayes Fluid Controls, as I talked about earlier. He started using Culture Index. So Culture Index, I don't want to go into depth about how this was created, but Predictive Index and Culture Index used to be partners.
Okay.
So then they separated, and Culture Index is just the behavioral portion without the cognitive piece. So Andy tried it with his team of 50, and they were really seeing good results on the hiring and retention and relationships. So I got on a plane, went to their location in North Carolina and saw it firsthand, asked questions. The president and his HR person were trained in this through an executive advisor who they are hired annually on a contract. So you do work with them, but once you're trained, you could administer the tool. I took the survey personally, and then he went over my survey, and I felt like within a matter of 3 minutes, even though he knew me, it was really, really seen. I just couldn't believe how accurate it was, a reflection of who I am.
That's great.
Yeah.
It sounds like you had some real life examples of different tools that you used, and you did spend a good amount of time really identifying the right tools. And I think the thing that you said is the cognitive piece, but then also the tool you could use for your executives to your plant floor people, because that is a very different skill set. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what happened after you rolled it out. What surprised you most about the insights you got?
Well, I wasn't surprised, but it was difficult for some people, even higher level executives, to be vulnerable. And it was challenging to persuade, even with evidence and data. And back to the research part, the validity is extremely high. So I dove into the psychometrics and the data to ensure this is something we could use as a hiring tool legally, which you can. So even though I had the data and the information, there was that psychological piece that was an emotional piece that was hard for people to kind of accept. They were afraid of what the result might be. And if I'm this, does that pigeonhole me into X? So no, I had to continually convince them, along with the advisor through the training piece. Look, there's 19 patterns. We all fit. We all matter. We all need each other to win. The easiest example I kind of got out of this and utilize that now is think of it in terms of offense, defense. If you're in a pattern, one of 19 patterns that's in offense, then you're moving Romac forward. If you're on defense, then you are protecting the bottom line, and we can't win the game without both sides. So it's really showing people kind of their secret sauce that they have within each pattern. And just because you share a pattern with someone does not mean that you're not unique as well, because there's nuances throughout that come through, and you can show the person how different they are from somebody that even shares the same pattern.
Yeah, that's interesting what you say, because first of all, I try to go through all of the assessments with my clients so I can experience it, because our candidates go through that. But it's also a natural human thing going, oh my gosh, is this going to expose my vulnerabilities? And so we get that. That's, I think, a personal thing, a personal reaction. And I know you and I talked a little bit about biases, and you said that is exactly why you have to be trained on the tool, because people automatically may think that. Well, that's great. Thank you. Can you share an example where the tool helped you make a better hire, or maybe even not hire somebody?
I have several good examples. Again, we had a critical management position that we were dealing with a lot of turnover, because the CI patterns for that position's manager at the VP level, as well as their directs, we knew this is kind of part of when you're trained in it, you set a C job is what it's called. We get a requisition, the position's open. People involved in hiring for that role all jump in and take what's called a C job survey. So they're saying, again, regardless of the human, here's what we need that person to do to be successful in the role. So once we have the C job, in this example, we found that the candidate was not an exact pattern, but not too far off. So the results enabled us to craft a very specific questions to try to pull holes around what should potentially be a blind spot for the candidate. Because a survey is a tool and only one component, we were able to ascertain the person's experience, values, and he had high self-awareness, that we really did feel like he would be a good fit. He's been here for almost 2 years and he's performing at a very high level. So that was definitely a win.
That's great.
And in a second example, director level person, it was actually a hard no based on his CI pattern. But because he had the secret sauce that we really, really needed on one piece of his pattern and who he is based on his experience, we did take the risk. But in doing that, we knew what we had to do. We had to make sure that his manager gave clear and precise structure, expectations, goals, and deadlines. And then to round that out, we had not finished hiring for this person's team, so we knew what we needed on the other end.
Right.
So we needed someone that was detailed and had pace and urgency and could execute. So because we've done that and taken the time to hire around this person, he's also been a successful person here.
That's awesome, which is a great parlay into my next topic is, you can tell it takes time and a commitment, and you really have committed to this, because I've seen that where companies do not commit to it, the tool hasn't been successful and they don't get out of the tool what the tool is capable of. And I know most companies stop after the first use. You didn't. Why?
Ultimately, like, I really believed in this with every part of my person. So I just breathed the existence in everything I did, everyone I talked to get the full buy-in. And I just kept pushing it and then showing them how this can help us. And then as we set the next group up for training, gets traction. And then the group more traction. So they are starting to see, at least from one prong, there's many prongs to this, but on the upfront prong of hiring and interviewing and even writing a job ad, they're seeing the success from that.
So you are the champion of this tool and the subject matter expert. So you're owning it. And so that's the other thing that I talked about is when you do have a tool, you do have to have someone that owns it and committed to it. So last 2 questions. What advice would you give to other leaders who want to make this more than just a checkbox during the hire?
My advice is, what's the cost of not utilizing a tool? So what's the cost of not doing it? The number is really high, and it's measurable when you get turnover numbers. Every high-level person or owner of a company knows how expensive and the cost of hiring and turnover.
Absolutely. So last question, how has this tool changed the way your team communicates, collaborate, or is growing?
Yeah, we're still working through this. It's not fully implemented to all employees. We're just now getting it to the production level. Once we have it fully implemented, then we can start utilizing it as a common language. And I think that's when it starts to really hit, like, people understand, and it helps us get everything out of the CI tool. As I mentioned earlier, it's multi-pronged. So it's recruitment and talent, it's retention, it's team building and conflict resolution, it's management, employee development, it's training, performance evaluation. So like right now I'm developing a new performance management tool to align with the CI and our values. And then lastly, succession planning. So
that's great. Thank you. Behavioral tools aren't just about hiring better people. They're about building better companies, but they only work when you commit to using them consistently with curiosity and intention. So thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate you pulling back the curtain and sharing how your team is using the tools to drive real change, and it's still a work in progress. If you're a leader considering implementing a tool, ask yourself, are you looking for a shortcut, or are you ready to invest in a foundation for long-term success like Rachel and her company? Because like everything worth doing, it takes time, commitment, and willingness to learn. Until next time, keep hiring smart, leading boldly, and telling the truth with compassion. That's it for this episode of Hire Power. If you're ready to hire smarter, connect with me at frostconnections.com or at LinkedIn at Kim Frost. And if you've got something to say about today's episode, follow the show and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, hire smart, lead better, and remember, how you hire is who you become. See you next week. No fluff, just better hires.